The asteroid field was impassable until humans started racing through it. Commander Kester of the Galactic Navigation Council had seen many impossible things. In her for centuries of service, she had witnessed stars collapse into themselves, watched entire civilizations rise and fall, and navigated through dimensional rifts that bent reality itself. But nothing had prepared her for what she was observing. Through the viewport of her command vessel as it orbited the outer edge of the Serpent's Maze. Serpent's Maze was the notorious asteroid belt of the explored galaxy, a snake-like maze of fractured planetoids, each spinning unpredictably through space at rates which could crush a starship in a fraction of a millisecond. The distortions of gravity alone would prove enough to unsettle any ship which would dare venture into its deadly vicinity. For over 3 millennia, it was considered a no-fly zone by all races of spacefaring. Vessels would lose months on their itinerary just to avoid its deadly reach, and yet there they were, humans, running through it like it was a playground. Kester's 6 eyes narrowed as she watched an incredibly quick human ship pass between 2 asteroids racing each other with enough strength to flatten a moon. The pilot went upward at the last possible moment, threading the needle without hesitation. Then at the same moment dived down toward a cloud of debris which would have been suicidal on any sane navigator. "Who is registered to attend today's event?" she asked her aide, Lieutenant Cephalon. Without breaking eye contact with the spectacle, 4 to 7 human pilots, sir. They call it the Serpent's Run Championship. Cephalon's voice was as incredulous as Kester's. Reportedly 15 million Federation credits prize pool, 15 million credits. More than a majority of worlds earned within a year. And they were betting all of it on a game which defied all laws of physics and common sense gathered by the galaxy over millennia. Kester had studied human conduct for the past 37 years, having had their species come on the galactic. Seen with their usual mixture of lethal genius and determined willpower, they were neophytes, newest members of the Galactic Federation, and had succeeded in flipping half of established bastions upside down with their unorthodox approach on everything from diplomacy to engineering. But this was worse even than their usual insanity. "Get me history records," she commanded. "I must know how this started." The holographic monitor sprang into life, showing archival footage captured 18 months before. The timestamp was first. Human transit of Serpent's Maze, pilot Marcus Chen, vessel Lucky Strike. Kessendersker Tar watched as one human ship slipped into the outer fringe of the asteroid field. It was a tiny ship compared to the massive rocks whizzing through the void. No bigger than a shuttlecraft. Logs indicated Marcus Chen had been a cargo hauler, bored with the 3-month diversion into the maze. He had plotted 6 months of patterns on this field, mapping grav flows and asteroid vectors with a ferocity bordering on madness. Both journeys had taken their toll on him for days. For days of unflinching micro-calibrations, seconds only maneuvering, and flying of a kind none of the other species of the galaxy was capable of. Emerging from it on the far side, shortening a 3-month haul by a part of a week, and overnight. Revolution had been effected on the galaxy shipping industry, but this was not where the story ended. It was just its beginning. In weeks, other human pilots were taking a turn at it, not to make a buck or because of a need, but because it was darn exciting. They spoke of threading the needle and started timing their transits, racing one another, to see who could sail through a colony passage with a minimum of time. What had begun as practical piloting had become this perilous sport. It was unveiled on a screen, at first lone daredevils running solo, then formal time trials, then 2-ship racing head-to-head. The sport had burst into human space, and pilots came from every part of their realm. They had created racing specials, perfected safety rules which would have seemed absurd to any other species, and constructed a racing league which now had a following into the billions. "Commander," Cephalon interrupted her train of thought. "We've received a message from one of the racing organizers. They would like a go-ahead on simulcasting their event on Federation channels." Mandibles of Kester clicked with what may have been a laugh. They would like to advertise their suicidal attack all across the galaxy. Apparently so. The human making this request is one Jake Sullivan. He claims to be race commissioner of the Serpent's Run League. Put him through. The view screen spasmed into existence, and on it appeared a gray-haired human male, with eyes glistening with the identical demented twinkle Kester had seen in every human pilot she had ever had the mispleasure of encountering. Jake Sullivan was a man with a flight jacket pinned with patches and rank insignia, and he was standing with his back against a crude command center of seeming disorganization. "Commander Kester," Sullivan said with a grin which was both charismatic and a bit unhinged. "Good of you to return my call. I know you've been observing our little soiree here." "Little group," Kester repeated. "Mr. Sullivan, You have 47 pilots set to fly into the deadliest asteroid field within known space. The Galactic Navigation Council has had this region rated unsurvivable. Within 3 millennia, Sullivan's smile widened. Yes, well, all. This predates humans showing up on the scene. Listen, Commander, I know how this must look on the outside. Believe me, I do. Upon first hearing of Marcus Chen's sprint, I myself thought the fellow had lost his mind. But then I saw the tapes, pored over the data, and learned something important, which is, you've been wrong about the maze all along. Each species we've scanned views it and sees chaos, chaotic killing, unpredictable destruction. But it isn't any of those things at all. It's a pattern, an incredibly intricate, ever-shifting one. Yes, but a pattern nonetheless, and patterns can be learned. Kester raised her estimate of the human a notch. You think your pilots have learned this pattern, learned it. Commander, they've refined it. You think what we're doing out here is racing. This is the epitome of human reaction, intuition, and lightning-quick reflex decision-making. These pilots aren't merely flying around the maze. They dance with the maze. As if summoned by his words, another spacecraft flew past the viewport of the command ship. Close enough Kester could see the face of the pilot through the transparency of the cockpit. The woman was young, about 25 human years of age, and she had a look of fierce, rapt attention with something like joy. That's Riley Martinez, Sullivan said, following Kester's gaze. She holds the record at Serpent's Run at present, 47 minutes, 12 seconds. The same journey last year would have taken her 3 months navigating the maze. And if she makes a mistake, Sullivan's face clouded a little, then she dies. But that applies to all good things, doesn't it? You can't stretch what you can do without assuming a degree of risk. They had learned this philosophy from humans before them. They seemed to subsist on a concept of acceptable risk, constantly challenging themselves into activities wiser species would avoid altogether. It was simultaneously their species' greatest asset and worst nightmare. Your request for broadcast. Rights, she said at last. What is your rationale? Because the galaxy must witness this, Sullivan said with a smile. For 3 millennia, the Serpent's Maze has existed as a symbol of the impossible, an impediment that could not be traversed. And now humans blast through it as entertainment. That is not entertainment, Commander. That is proof of the impossible. As a term defining nobody has figured it out yet. Just as she opened her mouth to speak, alarms went off all across the command ship. Her tactical officer, a meticulous vegan named Turwan, raised his eyes from his station with an air of barely contained panic. Commander, we have a situation. One of the racing vessels has deviated from course. They're heading straight into the central core of the maze. Kester's blood went cold. The Serpent's Maze heart was a gravity whirlpool of this ferocity that even warped spacetime itself. No ship had ever lived coming within 1,000 kilometers of it. Which pilot? She asked. Transmitter beacon has identified ship as Midnight Runner, pilot call sign Cameron Torres. Sullivan went white on the view screen. Cam's one of our best, he said aloud. If he's on a dive into core, something has gone seriously wrong. The tactical display showed the racing ship's trajectory as a red line ripping through the asteroid field toward the churning whirlpool of gravitic turmoil. At its center, at current velocity, Cameron Torres had approximately 20 minutes before. Point of no return. Can you reach him? Kester questioned. Sullivan was occupied at a communication console. Midnight Runner, this is race control. Cam, you're off course. Respond please. Static was churning through the channel, and then a voice was received tight with tension. Race control, this is Torres. I've got a problem up here. Navigation is completely gone, and I'm flying blind. Can hardly see through cockpit glass. What's your situation? Cam'd hit by a piece of ice about 10 minutes ago. Tore a tear in my starboard thruster housing, and debris damaged my nav computer. Fumbling dead wrecking my way out of this one, though everything looks exactly the same in here. Kester scanned the tactical display with growing apprehension. Torres was trapped in one of the toughest sections of the maze, surrounded by asteroids, whose coordinates shifted every couple of minutes as they revolved about the central anomaly. Without nav gear, an exit would be a 3-dimensional jigsaw puzzle with one's eyes blinded. Can you dispatch a rescue ship? She asked Sullivan. The human heaved a disappointed shake of his head. Not soon enough. By the time we can dispatch a ship to him, he'll be gone by the time we can pull him back from the core's gravity well. His only chance of living is if he can extricate himself from it. But you just said he was flying blind. He is, but he's not alone. Sullivan glanced back at the communication console. Midnight Runner, this is race control. We'll walk you through this step by step. But listen attentively, and do exactly what I tell you. Copy. Race control. I'm all ears. Next came an unprecedented display of human cooperation and ingenuity Kester had ever witnessed. Sullivan was instructing on how to navigate by real-time sensor data. But before long it was clear a lone human was not able to cycle through complex calculations quickly enough to guide Torres through the maze of spinning rocks. It was then that other racers intervened. Lightning bug. Race control. A voice came over calm. Midnight Runner is in my sights. I'm to clicks off his port side. Starburst here, replied another pilot. I can see him as well. His thruster is leaving a very obvious trail. Shadowhawk. Here. I've got him on sight. I'm high of him. Should he alter course 15 degrees starboard, he'll miss that bunch of rocks closing on his 6. Within minutes, a half-dozen human pilots had abandoned their own race to set up a makeshift rescue network about Torres. They positioned themselves at key points within and about the asteroid field, and they worked a relay of spotters and guides. A section of the maze was worked by each of the pilots, shouting obstacles and corrections as Torres flew blind through the kill labyrinth. Kester was holding her breath as she gazed at the tactical display. The red dot of Torres' ship wove through the asteroid field, as guided by his teammates' calls. Each correction would have to be precise down to a meter. Each estimate of timing precise down to a second. One mistake would mean death, not just to Torres, but perhaps to any pilot coming within range with hopes of providing assistance. Midnight Runner, tough port now, said Riley Martinez, his voice firm with emphasis. You've to big rocks hurtling straight at you in 30 seconds. Torres' ship banked sharply, maneuvering between asteroids with room to spare. By doing this, however, he had established a collision trajectory with yet another threat. Starboard. Starboard now, yelled another pilot. Vertical climb, 20-degree angle. I can't see a thing. His voice was tight with anxiety. My windshield's completely frosted over. I'm flying by instrumentation and your directions. We've got you, Cam, Sullivan said on calm, soothing and reassuring. Just trust us. Keep following our instructions. The rescue effort continued another 15 minutes, with Torres' fellow competitors flying him through increasingly dangerous regions of asteroid field. Kester watched in awe as the humans revealed the type of spatial sense and coordination at odds with what she thought their species was capable of. How did they do this? She questioned Cephalon in a whisper. His aide had been running non-stop calculations on his tactical terminal. Not quite sure, sir. The level of three-dimensional thinking required to keep track of numerous objects in motion and calculate intercept paths and gravity impacts. It must be well beyond an organic mind's ability. And yet they're doing it. True, ma'am. And having achieved it without having lost one's emotional poise under tremendous pressure. Most species would have frozen or panicked under the complexity of the situation. Back on viewscreen, Sullivan was still executing the rescue maneuver with smooth calculation. Midnight Runner, you're coming into the last sequence. Now this is tricky. You've got a break between two asteroids, but they're turning toward each other. Window will only last about 40 seconds. How big is the gap? Torres asked. Sullivan glanced at his screens. 30 meters. Anywhere between 25 by the time you arrive. He hesitated. That's not a lot of room for error, is it? But you can do this, Cam. You've threaded tighter needles at practices. Those were drills. I had an idea of what I was doing. You've got better than eyes at this point, said Riley Martinez's voice. You've got all of us. We're your eyes. Cam, trust us. Kester watched the tactical chart as Torres' ship hurtled toward a collision with the final hazard. The two asteroids actually were rotating toward each other, their combined mass creating a gravity whirlpool that would destroy everything caught between them. Timing would have to be perfect. On my mark, said Sullivan, his voice crossing the com channel. 3, 2, 1, mark. Torres' ship barreled on, hurtling toward the closing seam of asteroids. For a moment, he appeared unlikely to make it. The rocks were converging ahead of schedule, and his ship was frozen in space between mutually canceling gravitic fields. Then, with a burst of acceleration stressing his worn engines, Torres swept through the opening with less than 5 meters to go. His ship cleared the asteroids just as they met with a grinding impact which sent shockwaves through the surrounding space. The comm channel burst into cheers and congratulations as Torres came through the most perilous part of the asteroid field. He still had a few more kilometers of treacherous space to pass through, but at least the worst of it was over. Good work, everyone. Sullivan's voice carried over the cheering. But we're not quite done yet. Let's get Kim all the way home. The final stage of the rescue occupied another 20 minutes, during which the human pilots maintained their cover formation around Torres as he was shepherded through the outer extremities of the asteroid field. It was not until his own ship emerged from the last danger and entered open space at last that their simultaneous relief was voiced in every tone. "Midnight Runner is clear," Sullivan stated. "Cam, how you doing? Good. Race control. Shaken up, but good. And guys, I don't know how to thank you all. You all saved my life out there." "That's what we do," said Riley Martinez. "We take care of our own." Kester was deeply moved by what she had just seen. Throughout all of her centuries of service, she had seen many acts of courage and of self-sacrifice, but few times had she seen coordination of this level under deadly threat. The humans had revealed not simply individual competence, but collective cleverness greater even than any one of them would have mustered. "Commander." Sullivan's voice snapped her back into focus on the viewscreen. "I know this is perhaps a poor moment to mention this, but regarding those broadcast rights, despite all that had just transpired," Kester was clicking her mandibles as if with mirth. "You wish to broadcast that rescue mission all over the galaxy. Among other things, yes. Listen, I know what you just saw was dangerous. I know it looked like chaos and reckless abandon. But it was also the greatest display of human cooperation and skill you're ever going to see. That's our story, and we want you to tell it." Kester weighed his words. The rescue operation had indeed been spectacular, but it had also served to highlight fundamental differences between human risk-taking and other races of the galaxy. It would either inspire other races to reach a bit further themselves, or shock them at human stupidity. "Tell me something, Mr. Sullivan," she said finally. "How many pilots have you lost to the sport?" Sullivan's expression darkened. "7. In the past 18 months. 7 pilots dead doing what they loved, probing the edges of what is possible. And how many lives has this new shipping route through the maze saved? Thousands. Less time in transit has delivered medical supplies sooner to isolated colonies, brought about rescues that never would have been attempted before, and established trade routes which improved life for millions of citizens." Kester nodded intentionally. She had verified them personally. The Serpent's Maze human transportation routes had indeed revolutionized intergalactic commerce and emergency dispatch. Something that was originally a publicity stunt had become a part of the transportation infrastructure of the galaxy. "There's something else," Sullivan added. "The technologies and techniques we've developed for racing through the maze have applications beyond simple navigation. The acceleration of reaction time systems, the mapping of gravity fields, the high-speed spacecraft designs. They're all even being redirected toward exploration missions, search and rescue, and defense missions. Your recreational activity is responsible for driving technological progress. It's about pushing the envelope of what can be accomplished, even with a game, and providing us with a taste of what we can accomplish otherwise. Each time one of our guys makes his way through a needle that everyone assumes he can't pass through, we learn something we didn't know about physics, about engineering, about what human beings can accomplish." Kester was unable to help comparing this with how her own species evolved. The Zolkari took their time, went slow, and resorted to extensive testing and gradual refinements on an immense scale. They had advanced incrementally century after century, yet never seemed to achieve this sort of paradigm-shifting innovations which appeared characteristic of humankind's progress. "Commander," Cephalon spoke up quietly, "reports all across the sector. Word of this rescue operation is getting around through back channels. Several species are requesting copies of the tactical footage. For what purpose? Analysis. For the most part, the Vegan Science Council wants to study the coordination protocols. The Andretti Trade Federation is studying the navigational systems. Even the Catherian Military Academy is requesting data on reaction time increments." Sullivan leaned forward on the viewscreen. "That's what I'm about, Commander. What we're doing out here isn't beneficial just to humans. It benefits all of them. These methods we develop, these technologies we engineer, these restrictions we overcome, all of it advances galactic civilization as a whole." Kester had decided. "Your request for a broadcast is granted, Mr. Sullivan, but on one condition." Sullivan's smile was back. "Name them first. You will cover thorough safety briefs and warnings of what you're doing and its dangers. I do not wish other species to try to reproduce what you're doing without adequate preparation and knowledge. Ag second. You will disclose technical information about your safety and navigational systems to the Galactic Research Council. These techniques, if they truly contribute to civilization, belong to all races. Agreed also. And third, you'll accept regular safety inspections by the Navigation Council. I want to be very clear about what your acceptable risk is. Reckless endangerment." Sullivan nodded. "Those are good terms, Commander. You will have our cooperation." When the conversation concluded and the view screen went dark, Kester relaxed and considered what progress meant. Galactic society had progressed over millennia of patient observation, deliberate research, and slow fine-tuning. It had been a wary, practical form of progress, one which had served them well. But perhaps there was something of worth with the human approach as well, possibly stretching one's own definition of what was possible, intelligent risk-taking, and never assuming something was impossible could develop innovations methodology alone never could. Commander, Cephalon interrupted her daydreaming. It's time for the race. The remaining pilots will start their timed runs of the maze. Kester looked back at the viewport, from which she could observe the human racing ships as they crept into formation. At the periphery of the asteroid field, each was a marvel of technology, constructed specifically for navigating the impossible labyrinth of spinning rocks and gravity distortions. How much longer before a first runner emerges on the field? She asked. About 10 minutes, sir. Pilot is Elena Vasquez on a ship called Phoenix Rising. Kester settled into her command chair, bringing up external cameras on the ship for best possible viewing of what came next. Then we'll wait and see. I need to know how they do this. 4 hours. Kester watched a series of piloting demonstrations which confounded everything she had studied about organic reflexes and three-dimensional insight. Each human pilot approached the maze on their own terms, creating their own route through this constantly shifting asteroid maze. Others, like Elena Vasquez, liked a deliberative approach, weighing each step with precision and deliberate progress across the field. Others, like a rookie flyer named Derek Kim, possessed an ingrained flying style bordering on apparent precognition, their fraction of a second decisions repeatedly coming out right, even when appearing reckless. Today's fastest running was done by Riley Martinez, whose record she shattered by near on 3 minutes. Her ship was an extremely advanced ship of streamlined design by the name Offshooting Star, and it moved through the asteroid field as if performing a well-rehearsed dance maneuver, never once appearing to struggle or strain against gravities, which would otherwise have rent a typical ship apart. How does she do it? Kester asked herself, watching as Martinez's vessel weaved between a group of asteroids rotating so quickly. They made a recognizable disruption of the spacetime, according to my technical data, said Cephalon, consulting his instruments. She's combining advanced reflexes, predictive models, and what the humans would call instinct. The ship computer does the basic calculations, but the pilot makes target calls on a basis of recognition of patterns and an experiential sense of how the field responds, intuitive understanding of a gravitational anomaly. It would appear so, sir. The humans apparently have an innate capability of perceiving and responding to refined three-dimensional patterns under real-time conditions. They somehow appear able to discern a subtle order amidst seeming chaos. Kester watched as Martinez guided his ship through the final part of the asteroid field and into clear space with a time of 44 minutes, 18 seconds. The accomplishment was greeted with cheers from the other pilots as well as the growing group of viewers from all corners of the galaxy. Commander, her comm officer stated, we're receiving incoming transmissions from over 100 worlds. News of the race has spread through the Federation. Everyone wants to know about these humans racing through the Serpent's Maze. And what are they saying? Split reactions, Mum. Some species are impressed by this technical achievement. Others are afraid of the implications on safety. The Andretti Trade Federation is even requesting a license agreement on the Navtech. The Vegan Science Council wants a mutually beneficial research initiative. And the Catherian Military Academy is requesting if they can have observers at upcoming races. As racing on this day drew to a close and human pilots returned toward their orbital station base of operations, Kester took a seat to compose her report to the Galactic Council. How would one even begin to describe what she had witnessed? How would one even describe humans turning the universe's greatest threat into a type of entertainment? The human reaction to Serpent's Maze, she began to tell, marks a radical shift from how we view risk and progress. Where others had seen an insuperable barrier, humans saw a challenge waiting to be overcome. Where we saw chaos, they saw pattern. Where we saw certain death, they saw a possibility of growth and achievement. She hesitated, selecting each word precisely. The implication of their accomplishment extends deep into regions of direction or movement. They've shown what we consider a tough limit may be less severe than we believed. They've shown the impossible is just the unattempted. But she added, we pay a toll too. 7 pilots died chasing these successes. The human risk tolerance is far higher than most galactic races, and what they think of as acceptable sacrifices others will find unacceptable losses. But you can't deny the rewards. The new routes of transportation have revolutionized intergalactic commerce. The advances have potential applications in a host of fields. And perhaps more than anything, you humans have taught us all about how progress can amount to having the willpower to attempt what others would deem impossible. In conclusion of her report, Kester reflected back on broader dimensions of what she had seen. The humans had been part of galactic civilization for a century, yet had even within this short period of time already challenged fundamental assumptions about risk, safety, and possibilities of what was possible. Their approach was perhaps not preferable to the slow, measured progress of older species, yet it was categorically successful by its own lights. They experimented at edges others would never approach, and, having done so, discovered virtues and potential others would never have imagined existed. The serpent's maze would never again be considered impassable. The humans had seen to that. Something once symbolic of the impossible was now a racecourse, a proving ground, a testing area wherein pilots of all of human space would converge and pit their skills against the greatest navigation any part of the galaxy had to offer. And perhaps the best lesson of all was that the impossible was merely a word meaning what had yet to be attempted. The obstacles which seemed absolute merely existed hoping someone naive enough or bold enough would come along and challenge them. Commander, Sullivan said one last time, over calm as the racing boats were about to get underway. Thank you for allowing us a chance to show you what we do out here. Hope you can understand us a bit better now. Kester brought online the communication channel. Mr. Sullivan, I'm none the wiser about humans this afternoon as I was this morning, but I must commend you on what you've accomplished here. And I'm curious what impossible task you'll attempt. Next, Sullivan's laughter was loud and clear on the communication system. Oh, we've got plenty of ideas, Commander. Plenty of ideas. As human ships disappeared into the starfield, heading back toward their homeworlds with stories of victory and brotherhood, Kester stood immobile at her viewport, staring out into the serpent's maze. The asteroid field looked as it had in the morning, a similar mad whirl of rocks and gravity singularities that had intimidated navigators for millennia. But it was not the same, never would it be the same again. The humans had changed it, not by changing its material properties, but by changing how it was perceived. They had transformed something once deemed an absolute barrier, an emblem of impossibility, into a challenge tantamount to being sailed, a symbol of what was possible with enough skill, courage, and willpower. It was perhaps humanity's best trait. They did not just accommodate the galaxy as they found it. They shaped it, transformed it, would not accept its limitations as forever established. They looked at the word impossible as a challenge, and with this, they were changing not their own definition of what was possible, but every species' definition of what was possible as they saw their successes. The galaxy was a progressively different place, one whose edges grayer, whose hurdles more readily breached, and whose impossible a tad more plausible. The serpent's maze would still be lethal. Pilots would still die attempting to fly through its lethal circuits, but it would still constantly be defeated over and over again by human beings who would never accept that anything was truly impossible. And perhaps, Kester thought as she finally tore her eyes from the viewport, that was exactly what the galaxy was missing. A species reckless enough to plunge headlong into asteroid fields, brazen enough to risk the impossible, and capable enough to succeed as often as they came up short. The humans that made their universe's greatest hazard of navigation a racing track. What would they think of next? Something else which would never have entered any other species' minds. Kester was certain of it. The impossible, you see, was just another way of saying what humans had yet to try.